You're listening to Reignite, a podcast by two friends who love storytelling, video games, and romancing aliens. I'm MJ.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Why are we doing this?
So, the obvious answer is both of us are huge fans of the Mass Effect series and BioWare in general. For me, I think the reason I want to do it is because I think it'd be interesting to discuss how Mass Effect especially can affect a person socially, especially when it makes it so easy for you to play to your own moral code within the game. Why did you want to do this show, since this was the inception of it was really your idea?
I know, this is my brain baby, and I have no idea how I want to raise it.
Well, the good news is that we get to raise it behind the scenes, and only people will see hear the final project.
That's true. So they won't know how badly we screw up.
That's true.
Yes. It's the dream. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to do this podcast is because I have a fairly obsessive personality.
Really?
Really? Did you know I played Andromeda 4 times?
I think I played the original trilogy of Mass Effect. Let's see. I had a Renegade and Paragon of both genders. And then I also had another playthrough after that was just mixed, I think. So 4.5 times.
Yeah, I wasn't counting original Mass Effect. I played Andromeda back to back to back to back. To back? Did I say 4 backs? I don't know.
Considering how terrible the reviews were for that game, I'm quite shocked, actually.
I met my space wife in that game.
I will say that it did keep me away from it, even though I love Mass Effect so much. I still haven't played Andromeda. I can't pull the trigger on a game that's been panned so horribly. But, I'm sure there's...
That's fair. Hopefully I'll talk you around.
Yes.
So the purpose of this podcast is to look at Mass Effect in a more critical lens. This game came out in 2007, and people are still talking about it, which is evident by us sitting here at this table.
That's true.
So 11 years ago, this game burst onto the scene. 3.5 million copies sold of Mass Effect 3 alone.
Yeah.
And we still can't get the numbers on how many Andromeda sold, which is not good. That being said, the thing that fascinates me about Mass Effect is you have all of these choices. And how do these choices explain who you are?
Mm-hmm.
For example, when I first started playing, I always chose either Earthborn or... Actually, did I always choose Earthborn? I can't remember if I always chose Earthborn or if I mixed a little colonist in there. I never chose Spacer.
Yeah, and see, the first time I picked my character, since I have a superhero complex, we'll get to that later, I always picked Spacer and War Hero every time.
Right. So I picked Earthborn a lot because I had a very complicated and not pleasant relationship with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So a world in which I can take them out of the equation and have this character who did things not because she had parents to deal with, but because she had her own life going on. And, she had her own survival to think about, was fascinating to me. It was a way I wanted to live.
Well, yeah. So this brings us to kind of how we got introduced to Mass Effect, because that informed a lot of our early choices with the game.
Yeah.
For me, I had no desire to play Mass Effect when it first came out. Back when the first game came out, I was not very much into third-person or first-person shooters. I liked RPGs, but I hadn't really heard a lot about Mass Effect. I hadn't played the Knights of the Old Republic series, which were BioWare's previous games, but my friend Andrew had. And so after we were done playing Rock Band that night at his place, it was me, my friend Andrew, and my friend Brian. My friend Brian notoriously doesn't mind watching other people play games, and Andrew's like, Matt, you should try it. Just try it. And so I made my character. I played through the prologue. Next thing I knew, 11 hours had passed, and Andrew's like, you gotta go, I gotta get up for work. So clearly...
Can I pause you?
Yeah.
I find it very funny that you said that it was 11 hours, because when you originally told me the story, it was 12 hours, and I feel like you lowered the number to make it less embarrassing.
I might have. I also may not actually remember how many hours it was.
I'm just saying. Please
That's
continue.
So with that, I then, went home and immediately found out how much it would cost me to buy an Xbox 360 and a copy of Mass Effect, which was the reason I got a 360, was to play that game. So clearly I got hooked into it pretty quick, but I was pretty much a fairly meta gamer. At that point, I had been playing video games a long time, playing tabletop RPGs a long time. So when creating my first Shepherd, I didn't create a Shepherd that was like me. I created a Shepherd that was like my ideal or someone I would want to partner with. So I started with, and had predominantly played, a FemShep, close enough to the default FemShep, red hair, dark eyeliner, red lipstick, but also because I was a voice actor nerd and I like Jennifer Hale better than Mark Meer. Mark, if you're listening, I love you too, just not as much as Jennifer Hale, and you'll probably agree. Who knows? So I think what's interesting, and we'll get to your early experiences in a sec, is that this time around I'm going to try and play it closer to me, make it look like me, which I eventually did do in Mass Effect 1, but not on my initial or second playthrough. Whereas you played video games before Mass Effect, but you never got really as obsessed as you did with Mass Effect, except with a few exceptions. But Mass Effect was kind of like the biggest gaming experience you had had.
Yeah. When I was playing video games before we had met, I did it very, not even casually. Casual is more intense than I was. It was very passing. I was obsessed with Skies of Arcadia. I do not lie about that. I still keep the GameCube copy, so that way I can play it on my Wii. Mm-hmm. I will not let go of my Wii because I need to be able to play Skies of Arcadia Legends?
Yeah, I believe it was called Legends.
I think it's Legends.
Yeah.
It's either Legends or Legacy. I'm pretty sure it's Legends. And I played Zelda a little with my mom because my mom really liked Zelda, so that was kind of my exposure. Any other exposure to video games was my dad, who did not play games for the sake of narrative.
No.
He played games because he liked shooting Nazis.
Yeah.
He liked just killing Nazis in any way he could. He liked killing aliens. He liked war games. He liked anything where he could just shoot people.
Right.
Assassin's Creed was not his jam because he could not just go through killing everyone.
Right.
And he kind of liked Uncharted because it wasn't super dependent on sneaking. It was a little dependent.
Right.
So he could kind of fumble his way through. And if you or I were around, he could make one of us do it.
As he often did.
Right. So I just didn't have a positive association with games like that until we had met. And you loved it. You loved it so unapologetically that it spread to me. So really, this is all your fault.
I've been blamed for worse.
So you're the one that we have to thank for this podcast and for everything that kind of happened after me starting to play. Because this is where things get a little real, folks. I have suffered trauma in my past. Mm-hmm. And I have struggled with my identity over the past 10 or so years. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until maybe, I want to say 5-ish years ago that I started to wonder, oh, hey, I could, be pretty open about not being straight.
Right.
I didn't have a word for what I was yet.
Right.
Now I know that I identify as pansexual. But at that time, it was all a big old question mark. Yeah. I didn't know anything about my sexuality. I didn't know anything about myself. So playing Mass Effect presented me with this option. Hey, you could romance a lady. You don't have to romance the one dude on this ship that is actually kind of a tool.
Sorry, I have a cold.
Okay, I really did not like Hayden. He was a super wet blanket. But in Mass Effect 3, he comes around to be less of a wet blanket and he makes you eggs one morning? No, wait, that was Vega. See? I tried to think positively about Hayden and it didn't work.
Yeah, we'll get to more about the romance options in the first game. Does he?
He likes beer. Canadian beer.
Well, that's a mistake.
Caden's Canadian. Think
that
about
I know. For a second. Yeah. Well, because I think the actor is Canadian as well.
I think so too.
But yeah, well, and I had that. It's funny because I had more of my sexual awakening before the game, and I still and it's funny, I played a femme-shep who fell in love with a woman more because I liked the characters and less because I was like, ooh, 2 ladies, awesome. So I think it'll be interesting. We've talked about this a little bit, is that through these playthroughs, MJ and I are going to play as true to ourselves as possible with our choices, with our romantic options. Like, we're not going to... I mean, we may second guess our choices because we're both neurotic and often paranoid and anxious. But that said, we're going to try and play as true to ourselves as possible, which should make it interesting. And so it's funny because that game was never part of my sexual awakening, but I've kind of had a second one in more recent years because outside of the podcast, I'm a burlesque producer and host. And I've hung out in more queer spaces. I've met a lot more drag performers and trans performers and... all spectrum of the LGBTQ community. And so now playing through, I might be more interested in romancing a man than before. Just because it's not something I was even though I was open about being bi, I wasn't super open about engaging in those feelings until I hit the burlesque community, which was after I'd played this game a bunch.
You know who else is bi?
Who?
Kaden Nolenko.
Yes, I know that.
I'm just saying.
Yes, I know.
Maybe you want a wet blanket.
He's not... It's funny, he's not... finger quotes bi in the first game.
But hey, just because.
I know, he may not have known what he wanted yet, or wasn't comfortable, who knows. Anyway, this is not social justice aside, and I'm sure that kind of stuff will come up more later. I think it'll be interesting to re-interact with this game in a way that I don't know that I ever have before, because even playing as femme-shep in the past and as invested in the game I got invested in the way you get invested in a good book or a movie where you're not the character, you're along with the character. Mm-hmm. And so I think it'll be interesting to play as the character, because I don't know that I've quite done that before.
Yeah, I believe when I first played, this is what I tried to do. I tried to be as true to my, ideal of myself.
Right.
I want to be the kind of person that would do this thing.
Yeah.
Also, that's one of the reasons why I chose Soul Survivor.
Right.
As one of my background things, because I had suffered trauma. So that made my Shep more like me.
Right.
Also, fun fact, I used Shepherd as a way to cope with my PTSD recently.
Oh, really?
I was in Penn Station on a really bad night. It was a night where, all the trains were canceled. There was rain or something. I don't remember. Bad weather. And all the trains were just canceled. And there were so many people just crowded around me. There was no room to move. Everybody was getting madder and crankier, and it was a horrible situation for me to be in because I am surrounded by loud and angry men who are 2 feet taller than me. For example, I'm 5'3", so I am a tiny, kind of timid looking person. And there's all these people just yelling every time a train gets canceled, angry and angry and angrier. And I had to sit there and remind myself, Shepherd would also not be good with this.
Right.
Shepherd would also be kind of freaking out right now. Because even if you didn't choose Soul Survivor, Shepherd has been through so much, she does have PTSD.
Yes.
The dreams in Mass Effect 3 are kind of a symptom of that.
Yeah, and there's several theories as to why.
Yeah, there are a lot of theories, which even if we accept those theories as true, PTSD still stands.
Of course.
So I had to take this moment and think, well, what would Shepherd do? And Shepherd would probably get herself out of there. Because she's surrounded by civilians. So it's not like she could hurt anyone or take lead. It's just such a senseless time for her to get up on a box and be like, I am Commander Shepherd. There's too many people here. No one's going to care. She would just remove herself. Find a different way. Find a better way. So I just left and took the path. And it worked. I just got on the path and I had a much easier time getting home.
Well, that's great, though, that you can pull from an experience you had with a game. Well, it's kind of one of the reasons why I do my other podcast, Fun and Games, is because that gaming adds so much to just being a hobby. There's more to it than that.
Side note, listeners, Stormageddon does another podcast called Fun and Games, which you can find...
everywhere you can find podcasts, pretty much. It's Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. My co-host's name is Jeff. It's also on the Certain Point of View network. I also have a podcast called Autographs, where I interview musicians, magicians, comedians, actors, burlesque performers, blah, blah, blah. we can put them in the show notes at some point.
I have this.
Yeah. Well, you got to start somewhere. I'm also obsessive. I also have, this is one of 2 podcasts as of when we're recording that I have in pre-production. So, I've got a problem. But going back to Mass Effect, I think before we get into kind of the plan, which we've talked about a little bit, I want to talk about the pros and cons of Mass Effect. So obviously the major pros for both of us is the story is great. We both really love the characters. We love the world they've created. But I know that the first big negative for me, going back to the first game, which we're going to be playing through the games in order, is that the controls are god-awful.
Oh my god, the controls are so bad!
They're so bad. So
oh my god.
The problem with Mass Effect 1 is there were plenty of cover-based shooters at the time, but none that really had focused on a form of spellcasting, which in this game is called biotics.
Space Wizard.
And so the controls were jerky at best. Essentially, a lot of Mass Effect veterans say that if you want to get through the first game and actually play it and not skip it, to play as a soldier and just mow everything down because it's the easiest way to play. Now, that said, I'm not doing that on the playthrough we're doing for this. I'm playing as my class, the same class I always played as that I identified with, which was the Vanguard.
Yeah, Vanguard's my favorite too.
So we'll probably both be Vanguards. I may change it up just so we're not making the same exact mechanical choices. But again, this is more about the story than the mechanics anyway.
I just really like Charge because I like running at my problems.
Yes. Well, remember, the first game, there is no charge.
I know, and it's the worst. Charge is the best move.
The problem is with a lot of the classes, they gave them powers that didn't benefit, or weapon specificity that didn't benefit from the powers. The reason that the Vanguard in the second game has a charge is because you're shotgun and power weapon focused, and so getting into close range easily is better, and pistol. Yeah. But anyway, so that's my first major gripe with Mass Effect is how awful the controls in the first game are. Of course, a well-known gripe, and we'll talk about this more in detail when we get to it. We're not going to get into it now, but a lot of people were disappointed with the ending of the third game.
Yeah.
I've not played most of the DLC of the third game, so that'll be a new experience for me.
Oh my god.
The only game I've played through from top to bottom is 1 and 2. Like, I had all of the DLC for 1 and 2. I played through them multiple times. 3, after I beat it twice, I lost interest because of how disappointed I was in the ending. But I'm going to go back to it this time, so we'll see how that goes. I think that what's interesting about Mass Effect is it's the first game where playing on the casual difficulty isn't a punishment.
No.
It's a mode of playing. Like, they're not punishing you for playing on an easier difficulty. It's called casual and not easy because it's more about how you want to interact with the game and less about the difficulty.
Is it casual? I thought it was narrative.
So in the first game, it's casual.
In the second game, it's
narrative. In the second and third, it's narrative.
That's what I thought. I prefer the phrase narrative because casual has such a negative connotation. Like, oh, you're a casual gamer?
I know.
Like, yes, I'm a casual gamer. I do this casually. What?
Yeah.
I do this for fun.
Yeah.
What? Why?
I know. Well, also, people have different definitions of what is considered fun with playing a video game. But yeah.
I play games so I don't hate myself.
Some people don't hate themselves when they have to play the same level 18 times.
Really?
Yeah.
I find that very hard to believe.
I can speak from experience that I don't always hate myself when I have to do that. But anyway, so yeah, and so I think talking about so the goal is, as we play, of course, we will address mechanics and story stuff that we both like and dislike. That's also a part of this. It's an educated dissection of this game, both just why we make the choices we make, but also why, what we like and don't like as we go from quest to quest and mission to mission and planet to planet. I hated mining in Mass Effect 2.
I love it!
And you love it.
I love it so much!
And we're going to argue a lot about that, but when me and Mary used to live together, I would get to a point where I needed to mine, and she would... I think this was before you got really invested in Mass Effect, or at least the second game. You would mine for me, because you couldn't do the combat, but you loved mining.
Yeah, mining was hella fun.
And so I would stop, go eat something, or go to the bathroom, or come and sit next to her.
You'd have so many resources.
And she would just get me all the resources.
I depleted all of those planets.
So I think that's the first mechanic in Mass Effect that we both diverged on.
I think so.
I absolutely hated it, and you loved it. We both have different favorite characters. I float, but for the most part, my favorite character is Liara, because she is the consistent romantic partner I've chosen through the games, and because you can't romance Garrus as a male, which is dumb. But yours, of course, is canonically Garrus Vakarian.
See, okay, here's the thing. Everyone in Mass Effect should be queer.
I agree.
Just everyone. There's no reason for, like, everyone to not be queer.
Well, so the weird thing, and I've talked about this on other podcasts. I may have brought it up on Certain Point of View, which is a Star Wars podcast I've been a guest on. But, like, there is no Oh, yes. It was when we were talking about Lando Calrissian in the recent newer Star Wars. Right. And how Donald Glover said that he's pansexual, canonically. Yes. And people were in an uproar. And I'm like, dude, when there's thousands of races and sexes...
There's so many options.
Yeah, how could you not be? So, yeah. Not... that there's anything wrong with being straight, and if you only like female of every race or male of every race, fine. But it may almost make sense for most races in space to be pansexual because there are so many options.
Yeah, in my opinion, it does not make sense for, like, every character to be straight.
Yeah.
Like, a few people, sure, fine. But... especially in a game where you are interacting with all of these people, it doesn't make sense to me that you can't pursue, like, these interpersonal relationships a step further.
Yeah.
Because this is, like, your game. This is your game. This is your world that you're building.
Yeah.
So just let me romance Tali and let her be my space girlfriend already.
I think also a major plus for both of us has always been the storytelling in these games, with the exception of the ending of the third one, possibly, and the acting. The voice acting in this cast of characters is top notch. There are voice actors you'll recognize, voice actors that you won't, but will after this. The two leads, as I said earlier, were Mark Mayer and Jennifer Hale played male and femme shep. By the way, if you're new to this and you're along the ride with us, femme shep and male shep is most of the time how most people refer to their shepherds. I don't think that, I was joking earlier, I don't think that Mark Mayer or Jennifer Hale one is better than the other inherently. I think I just identify or get more invested rather in Jennifer Hale's voice acting. Mark Mayer is a great voice actor and a great actor. I think just there's something about his characterization of Shepard that didn't click as well with me.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't think that's anything to do with the casting. I think that's more to do that, for me personally, because I know tons of people who identified with him, that I tend to like female characters better. I tend to want to be along for the ride with female characters more. That's just a personal preference. Also, Jennifer Hale voices every badass woman in most video games and comic book movies and TV shows and cartoons. So there's that.
I think it's important for us to talk about what this podcast is actually going to do.
That's probably a great idea.
So, Matt and I have talked at length at this point about why we love Mass Effect and why we want to do a podcast about it, but not necessarily about what this podcast will actually do. Matt and I are going to, not literally side by side, but side by side play through sections of the game. Then we're going to come back here and we're going to talk about the choices we made, why we made them, our impressions, things that we didn't notice from our first playthroughs, things that we want to bring up, comparisons to the game as it stood then and our world now. Mm-hmm. For example, Tali's pilgrimage. We can talk about various religious persecutions with her. We can talk about Garrus and corrupt cops. Mm-hmm.
We can talk about Ashley Williams' horrible xenophobia and
racism in law enforcement.
Sure. We are living in Trump America, and so as of when we're recording this, so these are things that might be more apparent to us now that weren't when we were younger. Right.
And also, one thing that inspired me to start talking about this was a podcast. Pardon me. I'm okay.
It's all right. You're right.
A podcast called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, which is about these two people who have studied at a divinity school, who look at Harry Potter as if it is a divine text.
Interesting.
So they go through it chapter by chapter, and at the end, they do a sacred reading practice where they will look to the text and try and draw some knowledge from it. Mm-hmm. Also, a thing that they do is they take the text as is. Mm-hmm. So if there's kind of a plot hole, they don't look at it as a plot hole.
Right.
They look at it as that's intentional.
Yeah.
That was done for a reason. What could that reason be?
Right.
So, for example, Caden is not bi in game 1, but if we think of him as, but he is bi, but why would that not be brought up in game 1? So we can think about what factors are in play. Mm-hmm. And that brings up a conversation about being queer in military.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Right. Also, there are a lot of characters in this game. There's a lot of ways characters can die in this game. Some are necessary, some are not. And so anyone who's not played these games before, I will try not to spoil anything as we go.
Right.
We will not jump ahead to stories. But it is well known that in Mass Effect 2, characters in your party can die. Yeah. They don't all have to survive the final mission. And so my goal will be to try and keep everyone alive.
Oh, God. What if we don't keep everyone alive?
So this is what I want to talk about. I don't think that we should be able to, communicate with each other between podcast recordings. As far as when we're playing our sections, we can't consult and see what the other person did.
Okay.
It's all about what we choose. The question is, in parts of the game where a character could or would die that's permanent, besides the first game, because there's an either-or choice that you can't avoid, do we allow ourselves to go back and try and save them and restart that section, or is it final? If they died, it's like life and they're dead.
I think if they died, it's life and they're dead.
I agree. Because that will also change the emotional impact of stories later. Yeah. There are famous stories, and we'll get to it once we've finished 3, I believe. But there are scene options with some of the characters in the third game that are so devastating that when I did it, just to see them, I had to undo it because I was so upset. But that it won't be allowed this time. We have to stick with our choices, and I like that idea. Essentially, we want to try and play this as if we are in the game, in this world. Because I think it brings up more interesting conversations about the social connotations, the narrative, the mechanics, everything.
Yeah. The only thing is the triggers.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember what every trigger does.
Yeah. So there are quick time events that allow you to make choices on the fly that are either Paragon, Renegade, or you don't make any. And it affects the outcome of that cutscene. I don't have them all memorized either. I think those moments, if you can go back, then that's fine. I think that deaths should stay permanent, though. Yeah, I think autosave is not an option. Yeah,
my concern is more like, what if I pull a trigger and I'm like, wait, no, I wouldn't
have done that.
I'm so confused.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is fine. And the goal will be to come back to every episode with all of these things that we've done and learned and see how the experience has changed from either the first, 5th, or 10th time we played it.
Yeah. And you, as listeners, can interact with us. If you want to play along with us, at the end of each episode, we'll tell you what we're going to play next. Mm-hmm. Play along with us. Play that section. Take some notes. Tell us how you felt while playing it. Anything that you noticed that was different. Anything that made you think. Send us an email or an audio clip. If you send us an audio clip, we can mix it into the show. Yeah, so your stories can be heard. We're on Facebook as Reignite. We are on Twitter as Reignite Pod. Our email is reignitepod@gmail.com. We will have more social media as we grow probably, but those are the best places to reach us. I think we can safely say now what we're going to be doing in that next episode. Yes, we are going to start with the prologue. So we're essentially going to play, to those who are familiar with the game and those who aren't, we're going to play up until the point that Shepard discovers the Prothean artifact. Yeah. If you don't, that's not really spoilery if you don't know what that's about, but once you do know what it's about, you'll know, where to stop. Essentially, we're going to play up until the point that you discover the artifact, what happens, and the direct aftermath. Yeah. So after the scene ends on Eden Prime. There's a cutscene that you sit through, and then you kind of have free reign of your ship. That is where we're going to end.
Yes. And we're going to be playing as close to our moral core as we can. You are welcome to do that as well. If you want to play straight Renegade or straight Paragon and tell us your experience and why you did that, then do that too.
Yes.
But for me and MJ, that's how we're going to play it. And we would love to hear what your thoughts are on that experience as well. I think that this is going to be a fun way to re-engage with a form of art that I already love in a possibly different way.
Yeah.
I've actually never been more excited to start playing it again.
Yay. I'm really excited because there's so much media out there as well that we can engage and interact with. Like, I fell down a fan fiction, like, black hole recently and just read so many fanfics about Garrus Vicarian. So many. There was an adorable high school AU, and it gave me so many feelings.
One of my favorite things at my friend Robert used to call his old apartment in Brooklyn Jones, and when he was there, a friend of his owned a Garrus Vicarian figure that sat on their ledge and kind of looking drunk, and it just had a paper bubble above its head that said ... calibrations. So, which is a running gag that you will understand more as you play the game if you have not played it. But yeah, I think this might also be a cool tool for people who want to get into the game but have never played it. So if you have a friend that's never played the game and you want him to follow along with you as you listen to our podcast, please tell your friends. Of course, like and subscribe anywhere you can for us. The more subscriptions we get on iTunes or wherever you can subscribe to podcasts, the more visibility we get, the more people that can be involved in the fun.
If you like us, leave us a review. We love hearing what you have to say.
Yes, I agree. And I have a sign-off for us. If you would allow me to...
Do you? We haven't even play tested this.
We haven't. And you can veto it, and then I will edit it out, or we'll leave it in for fun because, the listeners should have a good time. But, so, it will start with, I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
I'm MJ.
And this is my favorite podcast on the Citadel.
Oh, you're the worst.
I know.